Have you ever felt under the weather, had a fever, cold, or a headache? Were you ever injured so badly that you needed medical attention? If you are a human being, then chances are you answered yes. The remedies for many common ailments are as easy to treat as a drive to the pharmacy or at worst the emergency room. Our modern medical establishment performs wonders and miracles on a daily basis for untold millions of people, and survival rates for all diseases and injuries are on a sharp rise. However, humanity is starting to forget how wondrous modern medicine actually is. There was a time, a little more than 70 years ago, when the medical profession was not as adept at solving these issues. The long-term effects of many treatments were not studied, and as a result, patients became far worse off than the original diagnosis. In their misguided attempts to heal, doctors unknowingly maimed and poisoned their patients, caused them to be addicted to substances, and even killed them by accident. Little to nothing was known about how viruses and other diseases could spread, leading to outbreaks, pandemics, and epidemics. Many medical procedures from this time period or before are the things nightmares are made of, as several examples of such operations have appeared in the horror stories of our time. We must keep in mind that these mistakes, these horrifying treatments from ages gone by are very important to the modern medical community, for without them we would not know what we know about medicine in general. Medicine, like science, operates in a never-ending loop of trial and error, where the past guides the future. Even now there are modern remedies and treatments that may be putting patients in danger, and the problems with them will soon be discovered, and the information will be used in creating new remedies. Keeping this in mind, we'll be breaking down 9 of these horrible old-time remedies for you today. Also, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe, and get notified when new content hits. One of the most reviled substances of our time, tobacco was once a revered and valuable plant due to its short-term effects on the body, including euphoria and a high-energy state. Its use as a medicine became popular due to a series of medical articles written by one Nicolas Menards in Spain in the 1530s. He claimed that tobacco smoke could cure more than 20 ailments, ranging from the common cold to asthma and ear infections. He even wrote, without any sarcasm at all, that tobacco could cure cancer. His writings only seemed to be proven true after King Philip II of Spain tested tobacco's effect as a counterpoison, as per Menard's writings, on a poisoned dog. The dog was saved, and all of Europe as well as many places in the world used tobacco medicinally for centuries afterwards. Now we all know how wrong that was, and what the effects of nicotine addiction can lead to. Unless you have been living under a rock for the last 70 years, you probably already know the dangers of nicotine use. Tobacco use is a leading cause of lung cancer, mouth and throat cancers, emphysema, and COPD, and smoking tobacco will cause an addiction that is very hard to break. It is also attributed to a truckload of other health issues from secondhand smoke, and is considered repugnant among the younger generations. I mean, no one wants to smell an ashtray. Although tobacco is no longer used in a medical setting, plenty of people still use it every day, and it still accounts for a large number of deaths every year. As drugs go, tobacco seems pretty innocuous compared to the next drug on the list. Yes, I am talking about the booger sugar, nose candy, the yayo. Cocaine is made from extracts of the coca leaf, and let me tell you that there is no plant on earth that has suffered more controversy from mankind as this one has. Thousands have been to jail for possessing it here in the United States, and many have spent their lives in prison for selling it. People fight wars over this stuff, and smuggle it into every country on the planet. There is reason to do so, as cocaine is one of the most powerful narcotics in existence. So it is little wonder it was used in a lot of products available to the public. People used it as an energy supplement, as in the case with Coca-Cola. Knowing that cocaine was a stimulant drug but not realizing its addictive and overdose potential, it was slipped in to make the product have more of an energy-giving effect. Homage to the coca plant is right there in the name of the soda and stays there to this very day. There were actual pharmaceuticals created with cocaine. Most notable were toothache medicines and nasal sprays that helped clear congestion. I'm sure it was effective in both cases, mostly because it would numb the patient's entire face. This drug is a stimulant, meaning that when taken in the nasal cavity, it expands the passages and blood vessels inside to indeed clear nasal congestion. Today, there is a wide variety of legal remedies for this, medicines that do not cause altered states of consciousness and extreme addiction. In addition to this, repeated cocaine use can burn holes in the user's nasal passages as well as cause rapid and irregular heartbeat. The medical community still makes use of coca leaf derivatives, mainly in toothache medicines and local anesthetics, but in much safer and controlled forms. Though the dangers outweigh the benefits with these two drugs, there were many more dangerous remedies in the pages of history that we have forgotten over time. Our next entry is one of those, probably because it hurt or healed absolutely no one. According to a seafaring medical guide from 1774, there was a standard treatment for a thing known as ague, which was a bad fever from diseases like cholera or malaria that was effective sometimes. However, if the fever, chills, and sickness continued, the doctor was to create an elixir of iron to give the patient with the recipe that follows. Take a quantity of rusty iron. The smaller the pieces are, the better, for the less quantity will do. Pour on it good strong vinegar, sufficient to cover it. Let them steep till the vinegar becomes of a deep brown color, which it soon will, and at length acquire a consistence of a black elixir. The vessel should be either stone or glass, but what is yet better is an iron pot, which of itself will contribute to the medicine. This less than lovely concoction could irritate the drinker's stomach and intestines from excess iron intake, but otherwise it would not be so dangerous to consume this. The problem is that it has very little benefit we can prove, besides acting as an iron supplement. Since no one really eats rusty iron objects in our day and age, so no one really knows the hazards of long-term iron consumption. As a remedy, this one is just bad all around, but not nearly as terrible as our next entry. Before the advent of our modern age, certain considerations we hold as basic were then unheard of. Perhaps the least obvious among those is the concept of cleanliness. By spending more time out in the dirt than we do now, our ancestors were at higher risk of parasites and other worms from less than sanitary food and the general grime of the environment. Tapeworms were a major health problem for people, so it is no surprise that the cure developed back then involved a strong, noxious chemical, turpentine. This is a distillation of resins harvested from pine trees which acts as a strong solvent similar to paint thinner. So toxic is the substance that people can become very sick or even die from ingesting it, which is not to say that it was an ineffective treatment for parasites. It worked very well. In those days, a bout of toxemia might actually be preferable to having an infestation of parasites in one's intestines. Luckily for us today, modern medicines for treating parasite range almost as widely as those for nasal congestion or headaches, thus eliminating the need for this dangerous treatment. Not to downplay the danger of drinking turpentine for any reason, there were plenty of treatments that were more toxic than this. Take our next entry for example. Our forefathers suffered from many horrible diseases and other conditions brought on by exposure to germs in the environment, and the people had little choice in the matter. The illnesses were out there, and people simply contracted them, but that was not the case for every disease out there. Sexually transmitted illnesses were rampant in bygone eras, basically anywhere there were prostitutes and Johns willing to visit them. Some would cause discomfort or breakouts of sores, while others were life-threatening if left untreated. All of them are persistent conditions which require strong medicine to cure. Misguided medical practices from long ago had once developed a treatment for most STDs, but the problem was that it was one of the most toxic substances known to man. See our next entry. Once the world realized how bad using it was, a new treatment for syphilis and venereal diseases was created called arsphenamine. The problem was that it contained arsenic, the poison of choice for murderous housewives and other killers who would want the crime to go undetected. This causes the patient to vomit, to have abdominal pain and diarrhea, numbness and tingling, muscle cramping, cancer, and even death. According to the WHO, arsenic-induced myocarditis is a significant cause of death in many countries around the world, and it comes mainly from groundwater. Modern science easily defeats most every STD known to man with antibiotics. Though it may be embarrassing to tell a doctor or anyone else about an issue like this, a trip to a clinic and a little time to heal and no one else has to know. Now imagine that you went to the doctor and he gave you a treatment that had an even higher chance of killing you. we can perhaps understand how mercury could be viewed as some magical substance that is both liquid and metal that moves in alien ways. After its discovery, there is no surprise that it had many magical and healing powers attributed to it. As medicine, it was applied as a cure-all for all STDs, for cleaning cuts and abrasions, for lice, for rabies, and the list is much too long for this video, all the while not knowing just how toxic that mercury is to a human body. Here are just some of the symptoms of mercury poisoning: anxiety, depression, memory problems, tremors, loss of vision, hearing, speech and coordination, muscle weakness, skin rashes, skin corrosion, eye corrosion, and of course, death. Mercury-contaminated groundwater turned many Western mining towns into ghost towns in the 1800s. This is one of the most toxic substances in existence, but in a time before people understood its dangers, its use for anything that people could dream of was widespread around the world. Some more modern cures for these illnesses were almost as dangerous, such as we saw with arsphenamine and its arsenic content, but at least they did not contain this poisonous but alluring substance we named after a god. However, not every crazy treatment from the old times involved ingesting a toxic chemical. In fact, some of them were just poured over the patient. Head lice and other parasites have been such an evil curse upon mankind that people will go to any lengths to rid themselves of these horrid creatures. As we have seen so far, people would drink turpentine and apply mercury to a lice infestation, so it makes sense that people poured gasoline, kerosene, and even diesel to their scalps to annihilate lice and mites. By all accounts, it was effective beyond belief, and one of my grandmother's surefire cures. It should not need to be stated how dangerous this is. These petroleum distillates contain a lot of toxic chemicals that can eat away at the skin anywhere it touches or remains on for a longer period of time. Repeated use in this manner may make the patient's hair fall out or cause skin cancer. To inhale gasoline for a long period of time causes hallucinations and damage to the lungs and nervous system. This is not to ignore the danger of ignition, and with all of the candles and lamps before the advent of electricity, it is a wonder that we have not heard of more human torches from this treatment in history. In many parts of the United States, lice infestations are extremely rare. This is due mainly to cheap and easy-to-use treatments found in every grocery store's shelves, and also public policies that put a soft quarantine on the patient until the infestation is cleared up. No one wants to be the lice kid at school. Yes, our forefathers meddled with some very dangerous chemicals in the times of yore, and they did not fully understand the nature of all the chemicals they worked with. In history's misguided attempts to heal people, not all of the dangerous treatments they used came in the form of a medicine or a concoction taken to cure illnesses. Some of them were nightmarish procedures performed upon the patient. In the heyday of this medical practice, there were a vast number of illnesses and conditions that were utterly incurable. These include sepsis, encephalopathy, throat infections, seizures, inflammation, and fevers. In what is the most ancient entry on the list, bloodletting was a procedure in which the doctor would cut a vein open to drain out blood in an attempt to remove infected blood, letting the body regenerate new, pure blood. This practice was used as far back as 3,000 years ago and remained a staple of medicine throughout the ages until in the late 1800s the practice was found to have no medical value. The main risk of bloodletting is, well, you guessed it, death. The loss of blood alone can cause death by hemorrhagic shock, and low blood volume results in low blood pressure, loss of consciousness, and severe shortness of breath. Once a body loses 40% of its blood volume, there is no guarantee that a blood transfusion will work. Those who did survive the procedure would inevitably have an infected wound at the site of the operation due to the unsanitary conditions of the time. Modern medicine has a cure or at least a treatment for all of these conditions, and in this age the only letting of any blood is done by phlebotomists, and only the amount needed for blood work, toxicology, and to donate to those in need. Though this is still practiced in many parts of the world, science and medicine agree that bloodletting should never be used again the way that it had been for most of human history. This barbaric treatment may have been gruesome, but at least it had the good intention of healing at heart. We suspect that our top entry appealed to the sadistic side of some doctors. Mental illness has been one of the least understood conditions in our history. Those afflicted with schizophrenia and other mental disorders have been treated in especially horrendous ways throughout the ages. It was once thought that these patients were possessed by demons and were subject to exorcisms, a treatment that never seemed to cure anyone of anything. Once science was born, experimentation began to find new treatments for many diseases, with mental illness being a major subject of these experiments. Many of these were brutal, but one that seemed especially cruel was the practice of trepanation, which is the practice of cutting or punching holes in the patient's skull. It was thought that these holes in the skull could relieve pressure on the brain, which was blamed for a number of maladies such as headaches, hallucinations, glaucoma, and insomnia. The more esoteric doctors of the day thought that this would release evil spirits and impure energy swirling around inside a patient, which had no other way to leave the body. The dangers are comparable to those of bloodletting, as sanitation was not a known factor at the time, but may have been more serious because an infection from a hole in the skull has a high chance of spreading to the brain. Loss of blood was a concern, and concussions, which were not understood very well, could occur from the trauma of the procedure. While mental health is not well understood even in today's time, there are medicines and other treatments that can bring peace to a patient. Sometimes, hospitalization is required to keep the patient from being a danger to themselves or others, but those cases are very rare thanks to modern medicine. With that, we have to come to the end of our list. Thank you for watching, and there is more content to come. Before we peace out today, I would like to present our honorable mentions for this video, old-time cures that did not make the cut and why. Number 10. Morphine for teething babies. Because morphine is still being used, just not on babies. Number 11. Drinking radium. This is so wrong it deserves a video of its own. Number 12. Electroshock therapy. Because, sadly, it is still being used today. So that does it. Until next time, goodbye, and remember, modern medicine is a marvelous thing that should never go unappreciated.